This is Calcat, the Calcatster, and welcome to the Christmas Eve special. Well, not really. I guess it kind of is. I guess we could probably put this on the creature feature thing, unofficial creature feature thing, even though it technically isn't unofficial creature features either. It's riftrax. So it's a riftrax crossover. So it's a little different. I guess we'll put it there. Maybe, or we can put it on the On Location Cat channel. Halloween one went. Probably put it on the Halloween one, and not because it isn't really unofficial creature features. It's riftrax. I'll probably put it on the On Location Cat. So yeah, this is a movie review of an old '70s movie called A Shape of Tomorrow, Shape of Things to Come, Shape of Things to Come. Riftraxed by the Riftrax, by the Mystery Science Theater 3000 people, as aired on Amazon Prime. It's yeah, I wanted to watch it. I know there was other cheesy science fiction movies, 2020 that I could have watched, but I thought this one would be more fun because it's sort of a throwback to this other stuff. It kind of inspired a lot of other stuff later on. It was right in that era between Star Wars, original Star Wars 2, Battlestar Galactica, which was right off of it. Later, Ice Pirates and all that other stuff that came later. Space Mutiny around the same time period. Cheesy sets, sci-fi stories. H.G. Wells' story, originally the H.G. Wells story, has nothing to do with outer space, really. It's about this, like, post-apocalyptic war thing where because it was written way before World War II, so it was like, so it had like this weird sort of war to end all wars thing going on, kind of like what they call World War One, and it was like the distant future when they forgot what they were fighting for in their war, and it was generations later, and there was like an evil dictator that takes over the world, and he's in charge, and then there's like, they gotta go rebel against him and fight him. So it was basically a French Revolution type of thing. Basically the June Revolts type of Les Miserables type of thing. Whereas the Napoleonic Wars was a generation earlier. And then there was the Les Miserables thing, which was a generation later. Well, about 50 years later. A little over a generation later. And it failed because you can't have a rebellion of the people that are in the elite. It doesn't work. That's what happened. Well, in a nutshell, there was a lot of other complications. That's why you can't have a civil war of the elite. That does not make any sense. So yeah. But in this post-apocalyptic future of the sci-fi movie, you have a society living on the moon, in which they homage in Iron Sky 2 as well. Society living on the moon. Same kind of idea. Yeah. But no Hollow Earth in this case. They do go to Earth, so it is a similar plot to that Iron Sky 2. Yeah, it's cheesy as all get up. The robots are like Daleks crossed with the robot from Lost in Space. It's only 10 years after the original Star Trek. They should have something going on, but it actually looks cheaper than the original Star Trek. It's amazing how cheap it looks. Although they had button knobs and dials in Star Wars 1 and 2 as well. And they were using, like, Cray computer, like, drawn, like, you didn't have hard drives back then. They had, like, reel-to-reels. And punch cards and stuff. Of course, the space women have perfectly coiffed Playboy model hair from, perfectly done up the 70s style. I can see that a lot of influences in ship designs with the Buck Rogers 70s TV show, which came on the same time. The Searcher was heavily influenced by that. Nacelles on the back were heavily influenced by the Rob McQuarrie designs of the one of the Enterprise design, which was later used as a heavily influenced background of Next Generation during the Battle of Wolf 359. And also Star Trek Discovery, which started in 2017, decades later. So the design was definitely influenced, has influenced other sci-fi. Yeah. The idea of having the saucer section separate, do that. They did that too. That was an extra race. Originally, the Star Trek The Motion Picture was going to have a separating saucer section scene. The ship was going to attack, and they were going to separate the saucer and crash the saucer on the planet. They decided that was a little too expensive, so they didn't do that. They just landed it in the, which would have messed up the hull. But, oh, in this one you have sort of a crew on Mars. I'm not Mars. A crew on the Earth, I guess they probably were going to use Mars and blow up Mars at the end. Oh, like L. Ron Hubbard's Battlefield Earth, but decided against it being Mars. Or all of James Blish's A Case of Conscience, also a classic novel series that I don't think they made a TV show out of. A Case of Conscience. They probably should. Interesting. It'd be also interesting if they made a remake of this, cast Mark Hamill in the Jack Palance role. They should. They should totally remake it. He would chew scenery like crazy. But yeah, they're not going to do that. But if they did, yeah. And also, Silly Trek referred to this movie as well in The Shape of Tomorrow, which was an episode where there was a mad leader on a planet. It was the sequel to the TV Planet one. So I was familiar with this movie when I did the Silly Trek episode. Way back, with a short story. That was not one of the better ones. The fans class didn't like that one. It's like, but yeah, it just sort of kind of rewrote with those Cola stories with the mad guy on the planet and he was taking over. Same kind of idea. Although granted the premise of a mad dictator has been all through history. Way before the Hitler and Nazis and all that stuff, but way before that, yeah. When the original story was written, it wasn't about World War II at all. But the 70s story clearly is about World War II and fascism. Clearly that's what they're getting at. Because it's only, for them, it was only like 30 years later, so they would have remembered it. And so you have, these groups living on the moon. The cargo ship is attacked. And they have the cargo ship is attacked. The cargo ship crashes on the moon, and they go and they find the robot pilot. They reprogram him to be a good guy, so he can help them go to the Earth, which seems far away for some reason. Even though the moon and the Earth, the moon's orbiting the Earth. They mentioned this planet Delta 3 that has the anti-radiation serum that's out there at Delta 3, and they got to go get it. And the cargo ships have it, and you might think, they're ripping off Star Blazers, Space Cruiser Yamato, with the space thing being out there on the planet, and the dictator guy and all that stuff. Yeah, but actually, at the same time, this movie. I would say this director of this movie was influenced by Yamato and Star Blazers. It's the other way around. So, yeah, Star Blazers originally came out in the U.S. in 78, 79. But in Japan, it came out in 74. This actually predates this movie. So that director was familiar with Vital Yamato, the series and Space Cruiser Yamato. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to put that in here. Kind of a similar character. The Deathlock is similar to Jack Palance's character. So yeah, they were familiar with it. So, absolutely. The Common Empire guy as well. Looked like it later on. So yeah, 74, 75, 76. So yeah, they were heavily, and Star Wars, of course. The Star Wars and Darth Vader and the Empire and all that. Of course, Star Wars was heavily influenced by the works of Isaac Asimov in the 50s, the Robot Saga, the Foundation, and the works of Frank Herbert, Dune, a decade later in the 60s. So yeah, clearly, and Murasaki's Hidden Fortress, and a number of other samurai movies. And he was and Star Wars was influenced by the Yamato Star Blazers as well. They both were, so it's cross-pollination back and forth. Interestingly enough, it's not influenced by Star Trek. There's no, except for that ship looking like a Macquarie design. I think it might actually be a Macquarie design, or at least a facsimile. It's very similar, which is cool. Ships. Delta 3 is probably supposed to be Mars, which would make fans of Cowboy Bebop wonder maybe it's Cowboy Bebop that they're ripping off. No, they're not, because it's the 70s. So we found that Cowboy Bebop is influenced by, guess what? This movie. This movie is really bad, but it had a lot of connections to other movies, so. Yeah. So they go to the Earth, they find these mutants, they're looking for the dead scientist guy. The scientist is dead. He's been killed by the radiation of the planet. They find these children that are hiding mutant costumes on. All the Village of the Damned, and Peter Pan, and the City of Lost Children, and there seems to be a theme thread kind of going on. Oliver Twist, kind of. They don't expand on that as much as those things did, but they're just there. They're the mutants, right? Mutant kids. Also clearly a nod to Miri and Star Trek. There's your Star Trek nod right there. But City of Lost Children is what they're getting read from. And Oliver Twist, same idea. A little bit of Peter Pan. So we have that. But they're not Kennys and they're not Kendras like on Brandon Tinault. On his movie reviews. He could review this movie, actually. He should. If he hasn't. That's a good one for him to review. Yeah, it's very cheesy. He doesn't do sci-fi as much, though. He does horror and horror fantasy and Godzilla's horror fantasy. Yeah, it's a little different than sci-fi. But he could do it. Yeah, he did Space Mutiny, so why not do this one? Yeah, So yeah, it heavily influenced early Distant Destinies when it was Planet Com, which became Canary Space. It influenced Space Timeline. It influenced Space Vanguard Starcrackers. So yeah, this movie and other movies like it influenced a lot of the early Brown stuff and Calicat stuff and Silly Track. Yeah, so I had to see it. This was the riff track of it, so they're making fun of it the whole time. But yeah, it isn't a good movie. It's a send up to sci-fi movies from the 50s done in the 70s. And yeah, there's a lot of influence from other stuff that would be immediately compared to, like, the 70s. Yeah, it Lost in Space a little too. The ship on the end kind of looks like it. Kind of. It doesn't really look like the Jupiter 2 that much, except that it's a saucer. I'd say it looks more like the Ralph McQuarrie stuff. Star Wars. It looks more Star Trek. Definitely resembles the Searcher from the Buck Rogers remake of the 25th century in the 70s with Aaron Gray. Definitely that was influenced by that. Searcher was at season 2. Battlestar in that series. Battlestar. Battlestar was something else. Battlestar was just as cheesy. Slightly better effects. There's a scene in which, and there's a scene that apparently Nicholas Meyer is a fan of this movie. There's a scene where a guy goes into the radiation chamber to like save the ship and stuff and go in the radiation, comes out and he's done something in the radiation chamber and he closes it. Doesn't tell anybody he's radiated. This older guy. It's right out of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which came out in '82. So Nicholas Meyer was a fan of this movie and put that in his movie. So that scene, the beautiful death scene with Spock, is cribbed from this movie. No. Oh no, they cribbed it from this movie. Yeah, they kind of did. And also, the mind sifting scene from the classic Trek was in there too. The guy puts on a mind thing that protects his mind, while the other guy's brains get scrambled over. And the robots are hilarious because they're like these robot cars. Like it's one of those typical stories where you have sci-fi stories where you have a mad scientist dictator guy that gone crazy on a planet that doesn't appear to have any other guards on it. It's like he's master of a mad planet that has this resource they need. They need to get this anti-radiation stuff, which they don't just cure everybody with immediately. So, just in the story, they do other things. kind of like what? Oh yeah. So yeah, sci-fi thing. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't the stuff the mothership the shuttle. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Let's analyze the heck out of this. That's similar to other movies. Um, can't say it's that similar to anything I've written. It's not that much. Although the later stuff with Nathan Char was clearly inspired by this movie, and there's some characters names that are similar, but not intentionally. I use them. They're similar. And of course, Ice Pirates is directly inspired by it, because the main character shares the name of the guy with Ice Pirates. Anyway, yeah. Also, the rebel force that's on the planet is all wearing red, and they look like they're wearing costumes from V, the Visitors. It's kind of the other way around, though, because that came out in the 80s, and it's likely the people that did V, the Visitors, worked on this movie and said, oh, those red costumes will look cool in V, so let's redo them slightly. Actually, the V story was funny as well, because they were literally, in that series, they literally copied that design from this movie, yes, and from Michael Jackson. The Michael Jackson jacket with those subservients. They were there. They said, that looks cool. Let's do our costumes like that. They literally cribbed it from Michael Jackson. I hope he got royalties, cause back in the day. Cause, yeah, the V outfit with the strips and the little things and the lizard people. Michael Jackson. And the glasses. Michael Jackson. That was very 80s. It was very 80s. Like Max Headroom. Yeah, there was a thing on Max Headroom. There was a special on Max Headroom, which would be a tangent. But yeah, that was another character that was referenced in Back to the Future. This character that it was a guy in a costume. Well, it was supposed to be a floating head, like in a Matrix type of thing, but early Matrix. It was actually a dude in costume it was faking, pretending to be a robot. It was really a man in a costume, but it was a very convincing robot. And so like this movie, there was like a goofy robot. So yeah, but in the case of that one, it was more like, well, in the case of Max Headroom, well, it was based on a British thing. And Max Headroom was like the thing they would put over, like, clearance over, like, parking garages and stuff. It's like Max Headroom. And that's how because he crashed and it said Max Headroom. And when he was a human, he crashed. Max Headroom. And that's how he got his name. Because that's the last thing he remembers. So basically, they're spoofing RoboCop as well, which also came out at the same time period, 84, 85. And it was on MTV and stuff, and there was a guy doing a thing about it. It's similar to this. Similar idea. There's a sort of a goofy leader guy in charge of stuff. Similar weird neo-fascist cyberpunk future thing. This movie didn't have that as much as it was a dystopia. Utopia and dystopia. Utopia doesn't exist. Dystopia cannot exist. So you have this sort of you have a Max Headroom type situation. You got this guy, but in the case of the Headroom, that guy, there was a millennial doing a report on it. You could tell it was a millennial. It wasn't a next gen person. And sort of there are several comments on the article saying, well, some of this is accurate. There's some X-Geners in there, X-Gen people, and they commented. Like, I'm from the X generation, born in 1970. I also commented, I said, actually, some of this stuff, where you think that it's only a commercial in Britain, it wasn't. It wasn't only there. It wasn't only on HBO. Maybe for you it was, where you were. But, no, it was on MTV. It was on cable, yes, but here it was on MTV, Max Headroom. And this kind of movie would air late at night on the other cable networks too. It's aired several times, and I think it's been on Creature Features as well, so it's related. But this was not a creature feature thing tonight. This was riftrax. But yeah, and it was like Max Headroom. Yeah, it aired on MTV, and it was everywhere. It was aired on MTV, and I think some of it was syndicated as well. So it wasn't just a commercial for. I think there was something Coke. There's Coca-Cola. So there was a Coke ad as well, which Back to the Future made fun of literally months after it aired. So they had this weird Gaddafi and Reagan, Max Headroom characters going off on each other. And in the movie, in Back to the Future 2, which was set in 1990, came out in 1990, so it was 4 years later, which makes it extremely dated because Max Headroom at that point wasn't a thing anymore. So it ended like in 88. They probably shouldn't have included it. But they're saying, okay, the 80s Cafe and Max Headroom. They probably thought it was going to be, still around by the time. So they filmed Back to the Future 2 in 88, 89, thinking, oh, it's still around, right? We'll just reference it. When they go back in time, they reference it. But really, they wouldn't have. They wouldn't have cared at that point. It went out. It was gone by 1990. But that's all right. So this movie like that one, gone by 1990. But yeah, Max was on MTV, music television. He hosted a couple of things. They did joke shows on other stuff like the Tracy Ullman Show and the other ones, and they had him appear as a head, and a talking head. Literally, he was a talking head. Before that was the thing, he was a talking head, and the joke was that he was a sort of a dictatorial crazy guy that would give news advice that was bullshit. And that's basically what they do now. So we sort of actual real pundits come on the news. And they're like that, but not glitchy like Max Headroom. Anyway, so yeah, he was everywhere for like between 84 and 86 and 87 roughly. And kind of waving away, and people were kind of bored. Yeah, so by the time Back to the Future 2 came out, they probably shouldn't have included that scene because that was silly and didn't make sense, even though they were referencing the 80s and the distant future of 2015. Now they're living in 2021, nothing like that. But yes, the far-off future. There's never been a nuclear war, fortunately. And movies like this prevented that, in a sense, by making the world realize that would be really dumb to do that. And so no nuclear wars, no civil wars, So you have stuff like that, Matrix style future where there's goofy characters and control stuff. You could do a remake of this movie, and I wouldn't, but you could. You could get like James Gunn or somebody to do it, and you could improve the special effects and make it modern. Dictator guy. Actually, say you could do Tarantino could help with it, but then it would just be cussing. Probably wouldn't work with Tarantino. To be somebody that takes it tongue in cheek and is like, okay, these guys are obviously not like the rebellion is a rebellion of 5 of them, and planet and half of them get killed. It's like no. Anyway, so there's my review of The Shape of Things to Come, which incidentally has nothing to do with the book. The book is, this war thing. Dystopian war thing, of which most young adult dystopian war stories are closer to the shape of things to come than this movie was. Actually, a lot of if you go and read the original Wells book, it is very similar to the a lot of the young adult fiction dystopian stories. Which is interesting because he was ahead of his time, 100 years. So H.G. Wells, not Orson Welles. H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds, that guy. He did not envision it as a space story originally. It was not outer space at all. Um, but War of the Worlds was supposed to be outer space, so the Martians came to Earth. And they were killed off by that. That was a clever idea that they cut Earth viruses and germs. Which does sound at first like a clever idea. Okay, the Earth. They added a line in the Tom Cruise version of War of the Worlds, though, where they said the thing that got ordained or whatever. Wells wouldn't have said that. He would have just said the Earth germs did this and that. He didn't say that in the book. He added got ordained for some reason. I guess just to add that in there. Because Steven Spielberg wanted to add that. But in the original, no, he didn't say it like that. Also, Neil deGrasse Tyson later explored the concept of War of the Worlds as well as Michio Kaku. And you were all like, okay, actually that wouldn't work. Because if panspermia was a thing, and their Martians were real and Venusians were real, technically all of us being from the same star system, and the same similar ecosystems, if those planets had life on them, we wouldn't be able to they wouldn't get us sick and we wouldn't get them sick. Because we would have stuff from all three planets. Wouldn't work. Oh well, he didn't know. So yeah, if there were Martian microbe things, they wouldn't kill us. Nor would the Martian microbes, in reverse, would get killed by us. They'd be fine. Because we'd have similar makeup. Yeah. Now, if they thought out some million-year-old virus out there in the middle of nowhere in the tundra, that would be a problem. Because we might not be used to that. But, yeah, space Martians, no. Nothing at all. Well, yeah, the ecosystem would be too similar if that was the case. But, oh well, that. Yeah, also, yeah. Dystopian planet story. Why is it that in your dystopian planet story you always have a group of. Anyway, so. Yeah, what do you always have like. They did this on Star Trek, especially the classic Trek, a lot, because really you don't have a lot of cast members for any given episode. Usually, at least the Next Generation. I know about the filming schedule of Next Generation more than the classic Trek, because we were really into that, and we wanted to do stories for the contest later on, and so we knew what the shooting schedule was like and all that. And they had, Star Trek, Next Generation, and Deep Space Nine. You'd have a typical schedule of 8 days to crank out an episode. 7 to 8 days to crank out an episode. So sometimes there would be 1 or 2 episodes being done at a time. But usually it was just one at a time. And sometimes it would skip a week. It would sometimes be 7 days, but that was usually what they would do is they would film 1 or 2 of them at a time. So there'd be one in post-production on the 6th day, and then they would go on and start the next one. So one of them would be ready each week. They would keep going. The new one, they're much slower. The new one, they have a weird schedule. But on Next Gen, they would do 7 to 8 days, and 6 to 8 days, and the actors would have to memorize all the lines and everything in a day for the whole episode, for that 42-minute episode of Next Generation. Classic Trek was 51 minutes. 42 for Next Generation. Deep Space Nine, about 42 as well. Voyager, about 42 as well. So it was short. But they'd have to memorize all the lines, get them all right, do them the script. I'm assuming they had some cue cards, but probably not much. But yeah, then they would do the lines, and then they would do an episode. Usually, I think with some of the shooting scripts we were able to get a hold of back in the day, it would say stuff in the script. If it was an early script draft, it would say for technobabble or something. It would say tech. So that would be like Geordi would say a line. If they would say and activate the phase inducer or whatever, and it would just say tech inducer tech, and they would just throw in whatever it is you wanted to. So there was a little bit of ad-libbing. So yeah, activate the warp core or whatever. I figure if he's going to say the same thing over and over again. It's a warp core. He knows what that is. So when he says tech, he knows what to say. Yeah. So oh, helm control ready. Helmsman do this. Yes, Captain. You could just helmsman do this. Yes, Captain. He could easily memorize that. Right. Helmsman, guest star. Got to do some helm stuff. Activate the ship. So they didn't need to memorize every line. If they had similar lines, they utter it over and over again, which was awesome. So now with this movie, I think they had-libbed most of it. but yeah, I understand that with Picard at least. I don't know Discovery's schedule. I know Picard's a little bit, and with the Picard show, they were going to shoot 10 episodes over like 3 weeks or something, which is insane, but not totally insane. I mean, if they're 50 minutes each, and they film them over like so they can crank out 50 minutes, each day, and for a couple of weeks. Yeah, they have a lot of time to put the effects in later. So yeah, it's a shorter schedule, really, technically, instead of 8 weeks or 9 weeks or whatever they give for a movie shoot or something. But yeah, I heard about the Picard show thing. So it was Ready Room and stuff like that. I wasn't on Ready Room. I just heard about it. But yes, just want to clarify that I was not on Star Trek Picard season 1. No. Yeah. So I was in. I was going to be in a fan film called Star Trek Excalibur, which never got produced. But I got to do my own fan films, and I've done Starship Chimera and Starship Locations. The Starship Locations this year. Chimera was 2019, and Starship Locations, Strange Worlds, and Mark Cards and I are slated to do Strange Worlds season 2. Well, I'm going to do season 2. Based on one of the other previously done stories, because that's easier to do in an 8-10 day shoot. I use Next Generation's 8-10 day shoot thing. I use their schedule because it's just me doing most of the voices. That's awfully easy to do. I got the script in front of me, so I'm just like reading it. But I figure that's easy. So yeah, anyway. I have not yet seen the Matrix movie, but hopefully I'll be seeing that shortly. It is Christmas Eve, well, probably technically Christmas Day, fairly soon, and watching a sci-fi movie and talking about Star Trek. Sure, why not? Though it is like a creature features-y thing. And I think I mentioned the having done storybook scripts. They used to have a writing contest, Star Trek writing contest in the 1990s to the early 2000s. Lots of unsolicited scripts. And I did Deep Space Nine and a Voyager one. Which elements of the DS9 one appeared in an episode, and elements of the Voyager one were thrown throughout. And I could not previously, when mentioning that on one of my unofficial creature features, I could not remember some of the Voyager stuff throughout, but Mark's cards reminded me of some of them, including the oddity of Flotter. Flotter, the oddity. The Flotter character was introduced on Voyager. He's blatantly taken from the Mark's card story. Part elements of the Judgment's Arbiter story. The Flotter was one of the senator dudes in it. It's interesting. Also funny because the Flotter was not a blue alien as in that story, but it was a senator. I guess he could have been blue. I don't know. But yeah, the joke was that when Mark's Cards was a freshman and I was a senior in high school, he came up and he said that I think it was actually earlier than that, because our high school and our junior high were together. It might have been the year before that, but I think it was I think it was actually when I was a senior, he was a freshman. So there was so he comes up and he goes, I'm from Flodi. I'm from planet Flodi, my character, and Flodi, and it's in the Flotter endocrine system. And I thought that was hilarious. The endocrine system, that's really clever. You're coming up with it's just fresh for coming up with that joke. The endocrine system, that's actually funny. Yeah, so I threw that in there because we threw a bunch of hints all through our two submissions to DS9 and Voyager so that we could find them later, including the female Vorta and the female Jem'Hadar, and the other stuff in the ship thing, and became and the Arbiter thing, which later was established. There was at least two Tuvok episodes that dealt with that, as well as that weird alternate Voyager alien thing in the distant future where the aliens thought the Voyager was a warship. That was similar in a sense to that story. Like they took parts of that and said like, oh, the war is going to start with them in the future. It's a little bit like that. Friendship 1 was a little like that. There's a bunch of them that were a little like that. Dr. Tenor De La Spy was a little like that. Elementary Dear Doctor was like that. So there was like, there were episodes that were kind of similar to that story. Were little pieces, and the Flutter one, of course, or there were little pieces of or little fan films sprinkled throughout. And I know that they looked at the Voyager script more than once. The DS9 script had a timestamp on it, and the Voyager one had 2. One in the 2nd season and one in the 7th. We were really interested in this one. We put it on the top of the shelf. We want to see it again. So look at it or look it over. So season 7, there was an episode. Friendship 1 is similar. Very similar. And this alien race was like mad about the ship go to their planet. Very similar idea. Although in the original draft of the Arbiter, it was just Tuvok mediating these two warring races that were fighting each other. Very TOS kind of idea. They said, well, it's too much Tuvok that season. DS9 one was like, oh, we don't want to have female Jem'Hadars yet. We want to female Vortas. We don't want to introduce that yet. Even though they ended up doing that eventually. They had one. The ship. Yeah. So, anyway. So yeah. To mention that extragalactic space thing out there. Oh yeah, and of course even Discovery is not without coming up with Mark Charles and Calicat story ideas. The people that do Discovery are quite familiar with Star Crackers, and they thought the Red Angel is a cool name, so we're going to use it in season 2 of our series. We're just going to put it in there. So it's Red Angel. We're going to change it to a person. It's a suit, time suit person thing. Q-like time suit thing. But yeah. Now they have a dark matter anomaly, in which case they're just saying, all right, we're referencing Silly Track directly. Okay. All right. Cool. You guys can hire. We're not doing anything. Come on. Anyway. Yeah. So we're not doing anything. Well, no. If that happened, you would know. Yeah. So that's my rambly thing on this movie. This cheesy movie.